Coming up, the NBA offseason landscape continues to shift, and with reports from Shams Charania, is it more and more likely that it's less and less likely that Donovan Mitchell will be playing for Brooklyn? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms and let you know that LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions, they do apply. And Doug, I got to tell you, man, life keeps coming at you faster and faster, and Shams Charania is on a warpath to break the hearts of Nets fans everywhere, desperate for Donovan Mitchell this summer.
Yeah, look, a bunch of different stuff came out here that's going to probably update the landscape a little bit, possibly not in the Nets' favor, and this is another example of how the NBA landscape or NBA news cycle can just kind of match you sort of fast and furious. And look, nothing's ever done till something's signed, but a couple of different reports came out today. The first is that Cleveland has fired coach JB Bickerstaff. This was somewhat expected that there had been, reporting that maybe the players weren't so into whatever he was selling over the course of the season. Usually that means, without saying it, that like the most important players weren't into it. Usually, right? Whoever the most important players are.
They went to the G League roster and they just didn't get a strong sense about where JB was headed, so they decided to move on.
Yeah, I don't think it was like Craig Porter Jr. and Imani Bates who were ringing in and be like, not so into JB Bickerstaff. I think it was probably more like the guys who played all the time. Okay, so that was one. JB Bickerstaff is fired. And then two, the report that Donovan Mitchell is open to now re-signing the extension that people have sort of been waiting to see if he would just commit to Cleveland. The report from Charania that just basically says that he's open to it. Now, he hasn't done it. And so we have to wait to see what actually happens. But the idea that he's open to it is very definitive reporting from a guy who's as dialed in as anybody when it comes to sort of like what could be out there. So things can change. But if you're a Nets fan that's sort of been banking on or waiting for the idea that Donovan Mitchell is just going to sort of like land in Brooklyn come hell or high water, these reports, and we got another one just that's not going to make it so easy either. These reports have to at least pump the brakes a little bit on the foregone conclusion that some Nets fans clearly thought was going to happen here.
Yeah, and listen, purely from a Cleveland standpoint, this makes a lot of sense. This happens with teams all the time. Hey, your best player is a little bit disgruntled, maybe a little bit unhappy, maybe thinking about greener pastures. Okay, what do we have to do to keep you here? Now, there's several instances where that doesn't go well. The Brooklyn Nets went through the iterations of this themselves. So it'll be interesting to see who gets hired here and whether or not it coincides directly with that extension that people, if you're in Cleveland, are hoping for Donovan Mitchell to stay there. Okay, fine. But just on a very high level, I will say that this is a part of, if you have been the contingent that has said Donovan Mitchell is coming to Brooklyn, the Nets are going to unload the war chest here that they have, and they are going to go get that player. And then in 2025, with all the money coming off the books of Ben Simmons and the decisions they can make, they're going to go add that next star, and that's going to reset everything. You don't get to then now jump forward to 2025 offseason. This will be a failure of part of that plan. And I've just found that part of this offseason to be fascinating. It's like looking at this past year and saying that the Nets did miss the playoffs and they were bad. Now, we didn't think they were going to make a deep playoff run, but part of their goal was making the play-in tournament and making the playoffs. So the version of this team and the version of this agenda, not getting Donovan Mitchell, would be disastrous for the start of that plan. This is phase one. This is phase one, and you don't have it. You can't get to phase two before you accomplish step number one.
Which is why I thought preached a little bit like, hey, this is just if this was the plan, and it sure seemed like it was by all accounts. Maybe they have their eyes on other guys that we just haven't heard of. But Mitchell has been reported with the Nets so many times that there's just for sure fire underneath the smoke, right? And where we were always just kind of like, hey, it's all good. I think Mitchell is a really great player. He's not on the team. You have to trade to get him. There's other teams that are going to be interested in his services. He's still on another team that could re-sign him. I mean, there's a lot of barriers here to the people who were just like, it's done. It's done. And it always just confused me, that line of thinking, because it's just like not done.
Victory lap first, process second. That's the classic way you want to go with these things.
Of course. And so for a team, the problematic piece with the Nets here is that unlike, and we've referenced this many times, unlike the situation with KD and Kyrie, where those guys were probably incentivized to join a team that looked like it was on the way up, right? Like was sort of punching above its weight and was, an attractive destination for like a sort of a lot of different reasons. This past season, that just doesn't play out that way. The Nets underachieved. Now they have a new coach and there's a couple of mitigating factors here. But it's hard to look at the team if you're an outside superstar and be like, yeah, I can see it. With the other version, you could. You're like, I can see it. Like, I can sort of see what's going on here. In this Nets team, it's a little harder to see. They didn't win many games. They underachieved. Players looked all over the place. And I think it's just like probably a little harder to picture what you're joining. So not to say that this is part of the decision-making, but when you combine that with these reports like, hey, might sign the extension, got the coach fired, basically. And like now it's kind of like, I don't know. Do you have any confidence that he's just in here? I mean, the odds have to be, at least 4 to 5 to 1. Like pretty high at this point. Start betting the idea that he would show up in Brooklyn. There's just too many barriers at this point to like feel confident about it. Not to say it can't happen, just to feel confident about it.
No, and we made reference to that, to the D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, right, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen version of this team on our Thursday episode, just talking about, why was that easy and fun to root for? Because it had whatever level of success. It was having some of that, and this current Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson one is not. But you bring up the really good point from a Donovan Mitchell perspective. Like everyone says, well, then you get here and then other players want to come with you, and players still want to play with Mikal Bridges. I have no doubt about that. However, if you were Donovan Mitchell, and we talked about this in the playoffs, well, how far do the Cavs have to go to make it palatable for Mitchell to want to come back? I think that at least something there resonated with Donovan Mitchell. Now he gets injured, so you don't get the full flavor in that series against Boston. That's okay. But to look at it and say, okay, so we at least prove that we're taking a step forward in the right direction. I believe with a new head coach, it'll go in a better direction. I believe that we can make choices. That we're already hearing rumors about Jared Allen and whether or not they may try to move him and bring in a different piece. If you're Donovan, oh, by the way, all the money that I can get on the extension from Cleveland, right? All of those factors combine here. And if you're looking around across the landscape and you're Donovan Mitchell, you go, there might be other teams that I'm interested in. Other teams might come with offers potentially to Cleveland. But if I have any say, which he doesn't, but if you're looking out there, you're probably putting a lot of other teams ahead of the pecking order of places you feel like you can go and win. And oh, by the way, that's what Donovan Mitchell has talked first and foremost about. He wants to be winning. He wants to be in conference finals. He wants to be pushing to try to win a championship. So you have to try to be thinking about places from his perspective. And maybe Cleveland is still palatable. Coming up here in a second, though. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Say coming up here in a second and then tell what we're going to talk about. But I do have one more point I want to make. Sort of about these kinds of trades and where Mitchell's situation is a little different when it comes to the Nets. And I will actually say that we will get to that here in just 1 second. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at LinkedIn. Look, if you're hiring for your small business, you got to find quality professionals that are right for the role. It's so important. Like small business owners, you're wearing tons of hats right now. It's hard to just focus on all these different parts of just the business and the hiring process. Is why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It has all the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. It's a vast network, more than 1 billion professionals, makes it the best place to hire, gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all this while making the process easy and intuitive. Look, LinkedIn knows that small businesses have so many different things going on. You're always trying to find ways to make the process easier. That's what LinkedIn is doing as well. They just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions too, making the process even easier, even quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, so as we roll along on this Locked On Nets episode, you heard Doug mention that I was going to mention, but ultimately he mentioned there's one more thing he wants to bring up here when it comes to Donovan Mitchell and these potential trades before we get into this other thing that's now starting to happen, which relates right back to Brooklyn, Houston, own pick control, and teams that if Mitchell is moving are going to be able to jump in these waters in a big way.
Yeah, so the one other thing here was that if you look at the landscape of recent years when it comes to these kinds of trades, right? The really good player, like top 20 player moving, higher player moving into new teams, those players were always moving into a situation where they were going to be like the 1A to another superstar.
Sure.
Lillard with Giannis, AD with LeBron, even like Drew with Giannis, right? Kevin Durant with Devin Booker. Maybe not going to be 1A, but there's someone else at least on their level, right? There's on their level in terms of player movement. Unless I'm forgetting one, like the trades where the best player by far moves to the new team. I can't really think of many examples like this. Even like going back to the Jimmy Butler trade where like Miami, which is probably the most comparable one, where Miami wasn't that good of a team. They had Bam too, and I think most people even in that time would agree that Bam was like considerably better than Bridges, right?
Yeah.
And because like that one was the closest comp I could think of where the team wasn't that good. Butler's stock was maybe a little down. They gave up Josh Richardson at the time, right? So like if you look at these trades with a really good player, those players are often joining someone else that's like on their level or above.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just like not the case with this. And that's what's always felt weird to me too, unless you're for like going out and seeing, oh, 2025 is going to have him and this other great player that's coming too. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that like it would be sort of unprecedented for a guy like Mitchell to join in a trade the Nets, considering the Nets current build. Because we just haven't seen that happen very often. I mean, okay, I guess like the only other, I guess we want to say maybe Mitchell going to Cleveland. Like maybe that would be, maybe I'm talking myself out of it because Mitchell going to Cleveland was sort of that situation.
But to your point, it would be now, and we know that in 2025, and the money comes off after this season for Ben Simmons, you're going to have a lot more flexibility from a cap standpoint. So the Nets will be capable, and they'll have potentially some assets still remaining, even though what is it going to cost if you went and made this offer for Donovan Mitchell? There go the Phoenix picks. So you could end up having a hard time doing anything from a trade standpoint, but from a free agent standpoint, you could accomplish it. But the hard part would be Mitchell. Yes, you're committing to us, but we still have to go to the next thing, to your right to what you're saying. Hey, I'm going and joining another elite talent on my level, and then we're still going to do some other things on the roster as well, but those are fringe around us too. When you look at a guy like Mikal Bridges, we keep saying this. Well, if he's your third best player, then that's really good. So that means in this hierarchy board, if you want to look at what's going to happen and what the roster would even be if you traded for Donovan Mitchell, who's still here, who are the young guys that take a step forward, could he and Cam Thomas coexist on this same team, all that stuff, you'd have to go get that other player. And again, that idea of organizationally, and for people that believe that this is the path forward, it's okay. It can be viable if you name player in 2025 summer that you go get. But I think that it is such a hanging by a thread scenario. Trade for Donovan Mitchell, give up the Phoenix picks to get him. What if you don't get the other guy next summer? Then you have Donovan Mitchell, and that makes us a better team, makes it a more fun team to watch, makes it a better podcast to do. Don't get me wrong. But it does not make you a conference finals team. It maybe doesn't even make you a second round team, depending on how the playoffs break down in the East. And then you would turn around and say, right, this is why this was a more tenuous path to take, as opposed to what we'll talk about, picks, control, and being able to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, right. And by the way, this also stands, and we'll move on to this other reason that Mitchell is maybe not going to come this direction, but this stands, the other thing you have to factor in is when you're given a choice to possibly pivot your franchise in a different direction and choose not to, because like if you stop yourself from doing one thing because you believe the other thing is going to happen, that's like sort of a weird double bottom line where you really get in trouble too.
Because now you have the comp.
Yeah, well, right. Because like now you could have done something else that would have gone a different direction that maybe had some high value. It's just a totally different thing, like tanking. But you just didn't do it because you were predisposed to just do this other thing that you thought was going to work.
And by the way, we talk about this all the time. In the moment when the opportunity came, the Nets chose to unload a lot to go get James Harden. We said, yes, you make that move 1,000 times out of 1,000. When it came down to Harden saying, I'm not going to be here, we could sit here right now today and reflect back on that and say, you know what? Should have just ridden it out and let James Harden walk off into free agency rather than be tied to what ended up being an often injured, very large contract in Ben Simmons that now hangs over you for a few seasons, right? It doesn't mean that we would go back and say, you still make the trade, you still try to make the best of it, but you can reflect back on that. And historically for Brooklyn over Sean Marks' tenure as the GM, when we look back at these moments, a lot of times you look back and go, shoot, should have gone the other way with it. Now, and by the way, just as a caveat, an example of where it went the right way when he initially refused the trade request from Kevin Durant. You waited, new ownership came into Phoenix. They said, hey, we'll give you everything. So you say, oh, great, we got the better package. Then another season later, you turn around and go, darn it, Mikal Bridges is not quite the guy we thought he was going to be. What is the next option that we're going to have? This happens for every franchise. You're always, and I don't mean this to say, oh, this is why you bounce back and forth. They should have. You can second guess everything from a GM front office standpoint. Every team can go through these. As we've also said before, the Nets just have really condensed down a lot of these pivotal decisions into a very small timeline that it feels like you can connect all of them together and go, yeah, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they kept jumping off on the wrong branch, somewhat seemingly in succession.
And then moving to this next piece too, which is which also muddies the water, is that there was also a report that if he were to enter the trade, sort of just the trade pool here, that the Houston Rockets would be I mean, this is the best, that the Houston Rockets would be interested in getting into the bidding. The part where the Rockets could use the Nets picks to put together a package to trade for Donovan Mitchell would just be the height of comedy. It really would be. Like, if you wrote it down in a cheesy script, they're like, come on, no, who's going to believe that? Like, they use their own picks to do the part where the Nets wanted this guy bad, but the Rockets possibly were, because here's the thing, the Rockets
had the better assets, the Nets assets to go get them.
And look, it's a coin flip. Let's call it a coin flip around what's better, the Suns or the Nets picks, right? I think that we probably could agree that if they really got going with it, then the Rockets could put together significantly better younger assets to throw into the trade that they might be they've got some good assets that are young that might be overlapping talents at some point where they just need to consolidate some of their guys. And so if you do that plus, and so I think they could put together a very, very competitive package here for Mitchell, get down, the Nets picks. Plus, I mean, I think they still have to convey some stuff to OKC, but, and then they have guys like Cam Whitmore, Jalen Green. I mean, I don't know how far they would think about going in terms of some of these other guys. I mean, Tari Eason, they have guys that they could put into this thing that would make it look very, I mean, Jabari Smith, I don't know how far they'd go here, but anyway, point being, they have real NBA young talent for sure. More than the Nets have, definitely. And this is just, it'd be so funny if this is where, I mean, funny, not haha, but whatever.
Not funny.
If this is the direction it would go, it'd be almost so perfect from a Nets perspective to have it play out exactly like this.
And it's funny too, funny, haha. So here's the interesting thing about it as well, because in effect, if we think Houston, because I do also want to get in the third segment, talk about how if the Nets, if it was Donovan Mitchell on the market and the Nets wanted to be in on it, then you talk about some of their young assets as well and what that looks like. But in the version of this where the Nets are not going to be the team that gets Donovan Mitchell, then you have to find a way to sit there and say, well, Houston, and at this point, this is where you end up shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, because if you make the deal right now and you give the Phoenix picks for your own picks, well, then Houston could turn around and use the Phoenix picks to go get Donovan Mitchell. It could be the Phoenix picks that facilitate that trade. That'd be fine. And the Nets get him. But because you turn down Houston, now it's like, sorry, we're not going to come back to the table. Because if you're Sean Marks, the Nets, what do? No. But I'm saying, if you're going to get Donovan anyway, do us a solid and give us our picks now. They won't do it. They'll just say sorry, because now from a Cleveland perspective, you go, well, this is too sweet, right? Not only do we trade Donovan Mitchell and that stings, but we get controlled assets from Brooklyn, who has no avenue right now, or at least a player that they're going after right now, to make it a minimum their 2025 really good, strong draft class pick be any better, let alone the third overall pick in 2024. As we all know, everyone wants to dump on it, but it's still now a top 3 pick that you're making in the NBA draft. Let's continue this aspect of the conversation and ask the question, if Donovan Mitchell is on the market, how many young assets do the Nets have that really bring value to a potential deal to sweeten the pot? We'll get into that in just one moment.
All right, before that, tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. That's a formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level up to peak performance, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Maybe you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered. Got 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, It's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home those huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers.
All right, so as we continue the Locked On Nets episode, just talking about how quickly the NBA landscape changes and how quickly it can go from, well, we're definitely getting Donovan Mitchell to he's signing the extension and he's going to stay in Cleveland, or he's getting to the marketplace. And we've always talked about this. You won't be the only team bidding, and your draft picks are going to be among the most valuable out there. The other than part of this, though, to extend it a little bit further is, okay, Mitchell's available and Houston has your picks and you have Phoenix picks. And we're putting all the Phoenix picks in the middle to get Donovan Mitchell. We could debate about whether or not that's a bad idea, but you bring up the really good point too. And then Houston has a lot of young assets. So who do you want? What is it going to take to get this done? I don't think when you look at Brooklyn, we already heard Noah Clowney now becoming untouchable. I think there's certainly an exciting upside to him. You put him in the mix. You put Cam Thomas in the mix. You put Nicholas Claxton in the mix on a sign and trade potentially. That's not rising up to the level of what Houston could put forward here. And at a minimum, it gets us to the place where we come back to, oh, it could cost everything. It could cost everything now to get Donovan Mitchell, and you won't have any control of your own assets or any real assets to speak of until about 2030. That is a dangerous precipice to be on, to go get a player in Donovan Mitchell who is excellent, but again, does not dramatically move the needle of a championship level ceiling.
Yeah, the other problem with the Nets, I mean, like the way it's constructed is that like they don't have the money matching gets tough unless you think, oh, Simmons is for sure in the deal, right?
And guess what? Those conversations, maybe we don't want the Simmons money. We'll take good money, not horrific money.
Yeah, of course. I just don't.
Right?
That's just not something. I just can't imagine that entices Cleveland at all. Like they're not the kind of team. I don't think that would be dying to just like bring him in and get him off the cap unless you're overpaying for it. Because like money matching, you got to put something in with, if Cam Johnson's in it, you got to put something else in with it because it doesn't make enough money.
Yep.
Like even Cam Johnson plus Cam Thomas isn't enough. Like you're gonna have to put in some more filler. Maybe it's Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith that gets it done. I mean, how enticing is that to Cleveland? Not, plus all the picks, right? Like you're going to need, it's every pick out the door basically, or like as many as humanly possible. So yeah, it's a little harder to put. I mean, all the Nets value here is basically around the Phoenix picks and then a few of their own picks that they still have, right? Like they just don't have, they have a nice package for sure. And they do have some money to match. Yeah, but it's not like super great stuff unless another team's very high in Cam Thomas, which Cleveland might be, right? Yeah. Like so, if they're very high in Cam Thomas, then then that changes the equation here. But Simmons, he matches the money, but I mean, look, it's Ben Simmons, the guy that doesn't play, so it's not. We've been through this 1,000 times. You're not sending out Bridges, obviously. So at that point, it's Johnson, Claxton sign and trade. It just gets, and it's like, I don't know why they'd be in the Claxton. They went through this 2-center thing. So I don't even see why that's
right. They're looking to move off. I mean, different model of player, but you're looking to move off one of your centers because you have too many centers.
Non-spacing center. There you go. They're looking to move on non-spacing center. I don't know why they would go for another one. So it gets a little weird. It gets a little weird about like, if these other teams are going to show up, how the Nets piece something together that looks very attractive. And the Suns picks are attractive for sure. So I'm not underselling that. They would have a very competitive package. But some other teams, if you start throwing in players, the Nets, it looks a little bit worse for them.
And I think one of the silver lining of this, if you get to the market for Donovan Mitchell, would be that if you're offering the Phoenix picks versus your own picks that Houston controls, you can paint a picture of, well, if you make the move with us and we give you the Phoenix picks, those look pretty attractive down the line, right? Like obviously. So you can think about it that way too, because one factor would be if the Nets miss out on Donovan Mitchell, but the Ben Simmons money comes off the books, they can go out, they can sign players outright next offseason. So that would shift it, right? If you're Cleveland, you're saying, well, it's good right now, but if we think that the Nets were willing to have this conversation trading for Mitchell, that means they're going to be ready to go on superstars next summer, right? So they're going to be making some big moves. They're going to make some splash plays. Now, what's the better risk factor here for Cleveland? That's probably a little bit up in the air, but I might bank on the idea that if you don't send Mitchell to Brooklyn, then the tumbling, rock rolling down the hill here starts to kind of get a little bit of speed picked up behind it, meaning not this year, but one season ahead of his contract extension talks for Mikal Bridges, maybe he gets moved, right? You start to be the Cleveland looking at the Nets and going, I don't know, we could be a year away from them spending a ton of money or a year away from them recommitting to the long-term view because they don't have control of their own draft pick. So it keeps becoming this really, I said tenuous a couple times now. It's just a tenuous prospect for the Nets to thread the needle on a successful version of this type of offseason. And I don't say we've been proven right on it because it's bad for the team and bad for the podcast and bad for the fan base. But it feels like we're being proven right now about why, assuming this is going to happen, it's going to be so easy to go get him. Mitchell just tell you he wants to go to the Nets and you'll do it. That's not the way it works. It's just not the way it works.
Yeah, and also too, like, I mean, one actually good thing in the Nets' favor is that the Nets picks are easily the most valuable. The Nets picks have the most value when the Nets have them. As long as the Nets don't have them, then they will continue to try, and it's going to be now this year went bad, but like the new coach and a new season and recommitment, and even like Simmons plays it all. I mean, there are other ways for the Nets to not be as bad next year as they were this year, and so the Nets picks will never look as valuable if they're coming from some other team, right? So that's a good thing in their favor. It's why they should think about trading back for him, but it's why that the Suns picks look better as long as the Nets don't have them.
Yeah.
A non-Nets controlled pick versus a Suns pick, I would take the Suns pick. If the Nets control the Nets pick, then I would take the Nets pick. If we can follow the thought tree there.
And you want a silver lining again. If it's Houston, if it's any Western Conference team trading for him, for Donovan Mitchell, you say, well, an Eastern Conference team doesn't get better, like Miami say that's speculated too. And certainly Cleveland gets weaker, even if they're going to get some young assets or some draft picks, though we would expect them maybe to make a quick pivot for another player. So there is that world, right? You look at the Eastern Conference landscape and you say it's going to get weaker if Donovan Mitchell goes to the West. That's true. There's other names and other teams that might make some, franchise shifting decisions. The Pelicans, if they're going to let some guys go, could they end up in the Eastern Conference somewhere? Sure. So yes, I think to reset it with Shams Charania saying it looks like the extension is likely now for Donovan Mitchell with Cleveland. It looks like the firing of JB Bickerstaff is a move in that direction. It looks like if he went to the market, a lot of teams, including Houston, be ready to pounce on him. All that builds up sounding like it's very doom and gloom for the Nets. It's okay to say another baddish year and 2025 offseason, we get to just try to attract guys in free agency outright, which in our hierarchy, I think you and I have been on the same page of, hey, trade Bridges, reclaim your assets, reset right now. Second best option is play out 2024, don't sacrifice picks right now, and then go to free agency and sign players outright. If that goes pretty well, then make a decision with some of those Phoenix picks. It is a slow play, but I think it's the more prudent path forward here. So it's not like it doesn't really disrupt our timeline if they miss out on Mitchell. It does disrupt what seems to be the vocalizer indicated timeline from the organization. We're going to go get these guys, and now we're missing out.
And there's a world where that works out better for them. Like being like forced into that situation is a better version of it for them because they can sort of like know what they have, not overpay until they know with this keep the Suns picks on retainer basically until they know something else is going to happen. Entice a free agent possibly with the, hey, we're going to go get you sign here. We're going to go get someone else for sure. Like you see it, like you can see that. I think that's not unrealistic. It's tougher, but it's not the Nets. They did it once with Katie and Kyrie. Like they did this exact thing. It's harder now. The landscape's different. Guys don't hit free agency. Everyone gets paid and asks out later. But there is a world where the cap goes up. They got this new deal. A lot of these guys hit. Some all NBA stuff is going on out there. They can make more money elsewhere. Like there's worlds where it could work out for them.
Any version of this, this is the quick thing I want to end on for me. Any version of this where Houston is in pursuit of Donovan Mitchell and the Nets can stand to jump into those waters, utilizing the Phoenix picks to maybe claw back their 2025 first round pick. Like, is there a version where you can use Dorian Finney-Smith, where you can use a sign and trade with Claxton if you don't think you're going to keep him here in Brooklyn, and the Nets can try to get a little bit, swap a pick and a pick with Houston to get some self-control back and send out a Dorian Finney-Smith maybe to Houston to help bolster their Donovan Mitchell roster. Like that's probably an angle that I would think is the next best version of this for the Nets too. It's like, hey, let us get in the mix here. You want to dump Steven Adams' contract on us? Great. Like, what do we have to take on here to make this palatable where we can get anything back? 25, 26, any one of our own picks back. Let's try to get that back into our pocket, even if it means swapping a Phoenix.
I do think we're going to see, I think this is going to be a very interesting NBA offseason for sure. Like, we already know there's going to be movement, right? Like, a lot of these teams, I don't think that the news isn't done here too. We already know Mitchell, like the Mitchell situation's up there. Brandon Ingram's his name's been floated as a potential trade guy. Trae Young's been floated as a potential trade guy. The Wizards just said they're interested in moving Kuzma. Like, there's lots of guys. I mean, these are all varying levels of like superstar talent or not superstar. But like, there's going to be some Paul George. There's going to be movement here this offseason,
and which will have a points, right?
Like, which will have and it'll have a cascading effect because every move is going to then show you a little bit more about like what is available or what isn't. So it's gonna be really, this is shaping up to be a very, very interesting NBA offseason for sure. But I think, just to sum it up, I think in terms of where the Nets are with Mitchell, today's news has to sting just a little bit, right? Like, it has to sting just a little bit if you were not to say it's over, but if you were on the for sure he's coming track, I just don't know how you can talk with as much confidence now.
And if you were on that track, take the L. Phase 1 looks like it's falling apart. That's just a part of your journey now. It's okay.
Well, take the L where it's it's a foregone conclusion.
Yes, exactly. That's
there's still,
it's no longer the W. Set it and forget it. Donovan Mitchell's coming to Brooklyn. It's not a reality anymore.
It's okay. I got you. All right, we're gonna get out of here.
If it ever was.
Make sure that you subscribe over wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as well. Yeah. Really appreciate so many comments over these last couple of videos. Really, really appreciate all the comments. Look, we said it before. The Nets didn't hold up their end of the bargain. They didn't make the playoffs. That's okay. They're not playing basketball. We're still going 5 days a week. Nets don't have a draft pick. They didn't hold up their end of the bargain. It's okay. We're going all the way through the draft. That's us. 5 days a week is what we're doing. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets.
I just believe that the interesting time in a career is pre-success. What shaped things and how did you get to that point? That is Steve Martin.
One of the all-time great posts. We're back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah.